A young college girl wanders too far into the sugarcane fields and unknowingly steps into a cursed place where a vengeful ghost begins to pursue her without rest. Each night she runs until her lungs burn. Each day she dreads the shadows that cling to her steps. Sleep slips away, her body weakens, and the echo of its silent scream coils around her thoughts. The ghost grows bolder, its breath freezing the air, its pale face drawing closer. Just when her strength gives out and she feels death pressing near, a mysterious man appears, confronting the darkness and giving her one last fragile hope. My name is Amanda, a college student from Baton Rouge, and I never thought the sugarcane fields outside town could turn into something that would haunt me forever. I went there late one evening after classes, hoping the air would clear my mind. The stalks rose taller than me, endless rows rustling under the faint moonlight. I walked farther than I should have, my glasses fogging in the damp air, the sound of crickets fading until only my own breath filled the silence. At first, I thought I saw a farmer cutting through the rows, his shoulders hunched, but the figure didn't move like a man. It drifted instead, half floating, its pale face gleaming like wax melting under a flame. Its eyes were pits of black, leaking trails of darkness down a sunken face, and every exhale turned the air cold enough that my skin burned with goosebumps. Fear struck before I could reason. My legs jerked into motion, stumbling over the uneven dirt. The field turned into a labyrinth, each stalk snapping against my arms as I forced through. Behind me, I heard it slide, a dragging sound like heavy cloth soaked in water, scraping against the ground. The chill tightened around me, freezing the sweat on my skin. I dropped my water bottle and nearly tripped, catching myself just in time. For a second, I dared to look back. The figure hung above the ground, its body riddled with dark cracks as if fire had once torn through it. Strands of hair floated around its face, though no wind blew. My chest burned with each breath, yet it closed the distance with no effort, its presence pressing against my back as if my own shadow wanted to crush me. The more I ran, the stranger the field became. The rows bent unnaturally, closing off paths I thought I knew. I tried cutting through, but every direction looped back to the same spot. My glasses slid down my nose as tears blurred my vision. In that haze, I saw the ghost standing ahead, head tilted, arms limp but spreading wider with each step I took. The ground frosted under its touch. A sound escaped me, part sob and part panic, and I staggered backwards. That was when another light appeared between the stalks. A tall man in a long brown coat stepped forward, the beam of a lantern in his hand cutting through the mist. His eyes shone an unnatural shade of blue, steady and unwavering. Without speaking, he placed himself between me and the ghost, his stance firm like someone used to standing against storms. The ghost surged, mist blasting outward in a wave that made the stalks tremble. The man lifted his arm, and though he carried no weapon, a faint shimmer spread out like a shield. The cold mist broke against it, scattering into sparks that faded before touching me. He glanced over his shoulder, his gaze telling me to run even if his mouth never moved. My legs obeyed, weak but desperate. Through the field, I spotted Daniel, a friend who had driven me there, his flashlight jerking wildly as he searched. He called out, relief and fear crashing together when he reached me. His grip on my arm steadied me, just as I thought I would collapse. Together we looked back at the clash unfolding, the stranger holding his ground while the ghost twisted and writhed, its body stretching into grotesque shapes as it hurled itself against him. The noise rose into a pitch that clawed inside my ears, making me clutch my head. Daniel pulled me toward the dirt road, but curiosity anchored me enough to glance once more. The stranger's coat whipped in the unseen wind, his figure outlined by a glow that seemed born from within him. The ghost screeched soundlessly, its shadow stretching across the stalks, but then the man pushed forward, the glow bursting into a white flare that swallowed the figure whole. The air fell silent, too silent, the stalks swaying gently as if nothing had happened. When my vision cleared, the man was gone. No footsteps, no lantern, only the lingering warmth of his presence where the ghost had stood. Daniel led me to the car, but my body shook too hard to explain what I had seen. Even now, whenever the cane fields whisper at night, I feel the cold of that breath return, reminding me that the boundary between the living and the dead is thinner than I ever dared to believe. I kept telling myself I would never return to those fields, yet weeks later, I found myself standing there again. Curiosity is a stubborn thing, and maybe I wanted to prove that what happened that night wasn't real. Daniel tried to talk me out of it, said I was still shaken, but he came anyway. He was always too loyal for his own good. Beside us walked Leah, a classmate from my literature seminar who insisted she wanted to collect stories from the locals for her project. She laughed at my hesitation and said fields were harmless. I didn't correct her. The stalks were swaying gently, the summer heat pressing heavy on my shoulders. Nothing looked unusual, and for a moment I almost believed the nightmare was just my exhausted imagination. But the deeper we went, the more I felt the same pressure in my chest, like the air was thickening, like something invisible was watching. Daniel noticed it too. He grew quiet. His jokes stopped. Leah still walked ahead with her notebook, scribbling observations, unaware that the silence around us wasn't natural. When the wind died completely, I felt the exact same chill from before crawl up my neck. I knew that presence before I even saw it. The stalks bent inward, narrowing the path until Leah stopped in confusion. Daniel grabbed my wrist, urging me to turn back, but it was already there. Not standing this time, but crouching low among the canes, its body shifting like smoke trapped inside fragile glass. Its head lifted slowly, and those hollow eyes fixed on me as if I had carried a mark since our last meeting. Leah dropped her notebook, the pages fluttering into the dirt. She whispered it looked like someone trying to crawl out of the earth, and her voice cracked before she could finish. The thing slid closer without sound. Every cane it touched trembled, leaving frost on the green stalks in the heat of Louisiana summer. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. Daniel pulled me behind him, though I knew he was terrified. Leah backed away, tripping over her own bag, tears streaking down her face. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Then, just like before, light appeared through the rows. The same man, tall and steady, stepped forward with his lantern casting pale gold across the path. His blue eyes locked on the ghost, not on us, and he raised his free hand like he had done that night. But the ghost reacted differently this time. Instead of lunging straight at him, it twisted its body into the stalks, splitting into thin shadows that slithered around us. The air filled with whispers, dozens of them, circling in tones too faint to understand. Daniel clutched his head, muttering that they were inside his skull. Leah covered her ears and dropped to her knees. I felt my chest tighten, panic clawing up, but the man only planted his feet firmly, his voice low as he spoke words I couldn't recognize. The shadows slowed, recoiling as if pushed back by something stronger than the lantern itself. I staggered toward Leah, trying to pull her up, my legs shaking so badly I nearly fell beside her. The man turned briefly, his expression calm yet urgent, like he knew the ghost had grown bolder and this fight wouldn't be simple. His light expanded in a slow circle, keeping the shadows back just enough for us to move. Daniel took my arm again, his other hand gripping Leah as she stumbled along. The man didn't follow. He stood between us and the ghost, his figure like a wall against the darkness, but I felt the weight of his silence pressing deeper than before. We reached the dirt road breathless. My chest ached and Leah's notebook lay forgotten somewhere in the field. Daniel wanted to drive immediately, but I couldn't leave without one last look. Through the wavering stalks, I saw the man still standing, light spilling from him in pulses that matched the rhythm of my own heartbeat. The ghost writhed at the edge of that glow, twisting into forms my mind struggled to make sense of. Sometimes a child, sometimes a broken figure bent angles that no body could bend. The man didn't falter. His presence was steady, yet I sensed he was straining to keep it back. We left him there because we had no choice. The car door slammed and Leah sobbed quietly in the back seat. Daniel's hands trembled on the steering wheel, but he drove us away without a word. I stared out the window, the fields passing in a blur, the sound of rustling cane lingering even after the road had long ended. I should have felt safe, but my body was still trembling, my thoughts unraveling with questions I couldn't voice. That night, I dreamed of the ghost again. Only this time it wasn't chasing me. It stood at the edge of my room, watching quietly, as if reminding me that it had not finished what it started. I woke with my throat dry and my heart racing, the sound of whispers still clinging to the walls. The stranger had saved us again, but I couldn't escape the thought that the more I returned to those fields, the stronger that thing became. And maybe, just maybe, the next time even he wouldn't be able to hold it back. I thought staying away would fix everything, but even distance didn't help. Nights became heavier, filled with faint whispers I couldn't trace. I avoided the fields, yet their presence followed, slipping into my apartment walls, crawling inside my dreams. Daniel stopped asking questions, though I caught him watching me closely, his worry unspoken. Leah kept calling, saying she couldn't sleep since that day, that she saw shapes at the edge of her window. She laughed nervously each time, but I knew she wasn't joking. What unsettled me most was that none of us had spoken about the man. Somehow it felt dangerous to say too much. It was on a Friday when Mark, a friend from campus, offered to drive us out of town for a change of scenery. He thought a short trip to the river might clear our heads. Leah agreed, desperate to feel normal, and Daniel came along to make sure I didn't vanish into my thoughts again. I wanted to believe him, to let myself relax, yet the fields still haunted me. Even as the car moved past stretches of highway, I swore I saw stalks of cane bending in patterns that weren't touched by wind. Mark teased me for staring too long, but his laughter faded when the road grew strangely quiet. No cars, no sound, only the faint rush of the river ahead. We stopped near the old dock, the air damp with the smell of moss. For a while, it almost worked. Leah's smile returned. Mark skipped stones, and Daniel sat beside me in silence, as if his presence alone was enough. But then I felt it again, that weight pressing against my chest. My gaze drifted to the tree line, where shadows clung thicker than they should in daylight. Something was moving between them, slow and deliberate. The sound of water against the dock dulled, and all I could hear was the low hum, steady and cold, filling the space behind my ears. Leah was the first to notice. She froze mid-sentence, her face pale, pointing toward the trees. We all saw it then. The same figure, or something that carried its essence, stepped into the clearing. It didn't need the fields anymore. Its shape flickered, head tilting in unnatural rhythm, and though the sun was still high, its shadow stretched across the dock to touch the tips of my shoes. Mark swore under his breath and stumbled back, nearly falling into the water. Daniel pulled me up, his grip tighter than before. The air thickened, and Leah clutched her chest like every breath hurt. Just when panic clawed through me, the lantern light appeared again. The man walked along the dock as if he belonged there, his steps unhurried, his eyes fixed on the figure by the trees. The glow spread wider this time, pushing back the shadow as it writhed angrily, its limbs curling in shapes that strained my vision. Mark asked who he was, but none of us answered. My mouth was dry, my thoughts spinning, yet a strange calm settled when the man lifted his hand once more. The ghost did not retreat easily. It lashed against the air, a storm of whispers rushing over us, pulling hair and tugging at clothes as if unseen hands reached from every side. Leah cried out, holding onto the dock post, while Daniel shielded me, though he shook with fear himself. The man's light flared, brighter, steadier, driving the thing back step by step. Its face twisted in silent fury, fading against the radiance until only the sound of rushing water remained. Then it was gone, dissolved into nothing, leaving only the sway of trees behind. We stood there trembling, unsure whether to thank him or run. The man looked at us briefly, his expression unreadable, then turned toward the water as if listening to something far away. His silence spoke more than words, and I realized he had not appeared for us, but for the battle itself. Still, without him, none of us would have left that dock. Mark finally muttered that we should go, his voice thin. Leah could barely walk, her legs shaking, and Daniel half carried her to the car. I followed, my eyes locked on the man until the dock disappeared from sight. That night, I couldn't sleep. My apartment was quiet, but I felt the same hum vibrating faintly in the air. When I closed my eyes, I saw the shadow stretching toward me again, weaker yet stubborn, as though it had marked me from the start. The man had pushed it away twice now, but it no longer needed the fields to find me. My hands trembled as I realized something I had tried to ignore. The ghost wasn't haunting a place anymore. It was haunting us. I thought avoiding the fields would keep me safe, but fear has a way of finding cracks. Weeks had passed since the dock, yet the air around me still carried a tension I couldn't shake. Sleep came in fragments, every shadow in my room shifting like it wanted to crawl closer. Daniel stayed nearby more often now, his presence steady though he rarely said much. Leah called almost every night, her voice tight, asking if I still felt it too. Mark tried to pretend nothing had happened, but I noticed he avoided looking into dark corners, like even his confidence had been cracked. It was during one of those restless nights that the atmosphere in my apartment changed. The air grew colder, humming faintly like wires vibrating in the walls. I lit a small lamp by my desk, though the glow seemed swallowed before reaching the corners. That was when Leah knocked at my door, pale and trembling, saying she couldn't be in her own room anymore. Daniel followed soon after, carrying coffee as if caffeine could guard us from something beyond flesh and bone. Mark arrived last, uneasy but determined, insisting we shouldn't be alone. It should have been comforting. Yet 4 of us together only made the room feel more fragile. The whispers began softly, threading between our words. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion, but when Leah stopped mid-sentence and pressed her hands over her ears, I knew she heard it too. Mark scanned the room, muttering under his breath, and Daniel reached for me as if grounding me would keep me from vanishing. The lamp flickered, shadows stretching high against the ceiling. I felt my chest tighten, not from fear alone, but from something pulling inward, as though my breath belonged to something else. Then the door at the end of the hall creaked. None of us had touched it, yet it opened slowly, revealing only darkness inside. From that darkness, the figure emerged again, its form wavering but undeniable. My body froze even as every instinct screamed to run. Leah sobbed softly. Mark cursed under his breath, and Daniel stepped in front of me, though he shook as badly as I did. The presence carried no sound of footsteps, only the deep vibration that filled the apartment walls. Its shadow reached toward us, curling like smoke, brushing the floorboards as though tasting its way forward. Just when the weight grew unbearable, the light appeared once more. The man stood in the hallway, his lantern glowing with a calm defiance that silenced the whispers. He moved without hurry, yet the air bent around him as though even the walls recognized his authority. The shadow recoiled, twisting violently, but the man didn't falter. His eyes met mine for the briefest moment, grounding me in a way words couldn't. The lantern brightened, flooding the hall, and the figure shrank back into the dark, leaving only the echo of its hum fading into silence. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Leah collapsed onto the couch, shaking uncontrollably. Mark paced the floor, running his hands through his hair, searching for something to rationalize what we had witnessed. Daniel stayed close, his hand still around mine, though his gaze was fixed on the hallway where the man had stood. But when I turned to thank him, he was gone. The lantern's glow had vanished too, as though it had never been there. The quiet that followed was heavy, more suffocating than before. We all knew this wasn't finished. Twice he had saved me, twice he had driven the shadow back, but each time it had returned stronger, closer, no longer bound to the place where it first appeared. I wondered if it was tethered to me somehow, if I had unknowingly carried it out of those fields. The thought made my stomach twist. That night, after the others left, I sat awake until dawn. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow stretched longer than it should. I wanted to believe the man's presence was enough to keep me safe, but his silence carried its own warning. Protection wasn't the same as freedom. Whatever haunted us was still searching, and I wasn't sure how many times light alone could keep it away. The days after the hallway incident blurred together, though I remember how silence seemed to follow me like a shadow stitched to my heels. I tried to go back to a routine, coffee in the morning, lectures, late-night study sessions, but every familiar place carried a tension beneath its skin. Even walking across campus felt different, as if the air itself bent around me. Daniel stayed close, though he never said what he was really thinking. Leah became restless, constantly asking to sleep over, while Mark insisted on distracting us with jokes that no one laughed at for long. One evening we decided to meet at the library, hoping that fluorescent lights and the company of strangers might keep us grounded. The building was crowded, yet I felt a prickling at the base of my neck the moment I stepped inside. The air was heavier than it should have been, the silence between whispers sharper than any book's edge. We sat together at a long table, pretending to read, though our eyes flicked toward the high windows where the dark pressed in like water against glass. Leah's hand shook every time she turned a page. Daniel's jaw tightened each time the old pipes groaned, and even Mark looked smaller than usual, hunched over his book as though hiding. The first sign came when the clock on the far wall stopped. No one else seemed to notice, but I watched the second hand freeze, and a cold ripple traveled across my skin. Leah exhaled sharply, muttering that she couldn't stay here, but before we could move, the overhead lights dimmed one by one. Shadows stretched, spilling long across the floor, bending in ways that didn't match the furniture. People around us continued to read, unaware, their faces unnaturally still, too focused, too quiet. That was when I realized we were the only ones reacting. Daniel reached for my arm, steadying me, his fingers trembling more than mine. Mark stood quickly, knocking his chair over, but no one turned to look. Leah whispered that their eyes weren't blinking, and when I dared glance up, she was right. Every head was bowed, every page turning in unison, like puppets caught in a silent rehearsal. Then the sound began again, that low hum, weaving through the rows of books like breath against the back of the neck. My stomach knotted, my pulse climbing higher with every vibration that echoed through the floor. And then, from between the stacks, the figure appeared once more. Its form was darker than shadow, bending the space around it, sliding between the shelves without a sound. My chest tightened, my body frozen, though my mind screamed to run. Leah clutched the edge of the table, knuckles white. Mark swore under his breath, and Daniel moved forward as if to block its path. But before it reached us, a warm glow cut through the dark. The man was there, lantern in hand, his presence steady and unshaken. He didn't speak, but the light spread outward, and with it came a strange clarity. The hum faltered, the puppet-like stillness broke, and the students around us blinked, confused, unaware of what had passed. The figure shrank back into the shelves, twisting violently before fading, as though pulled into the dark it had come from. The library lights returned in a flicker, the clock ticking once more, leaving no trace of what we had seen. The man's eyes lingered on me, calm yet weighted, as if reminding me this was far from over. Then, like before, he was gone, the lantern's glow dissolving into ordinary light. Daniel exhaled hard, his shoulders dropping as if he'd been holding his breath for minutes. Leah sat down heavily, wiping her eyes, while Mark paced, muttering that none of this made sense. I couldn't move at all. My body was there, but my thoughts felt untethered, drifting in the echo of something I couldn't name. Walking home that night, we didn't talk much. The streets were empty, the air unusually still. I wondered why it kept finding me. Why, no matter where I went, it followed. And though he had saved me again, the man's silence gnawed at me. If the light could drive it back, why hadn't it ended yet? The question pressed harder with every step, lingering long after I locked my door and sat in the dark, listening for the hum that I knew would return. It was late autumn when the nights began to feel heavier than usual. I told myself it was only the cold creeping in, but deep down I knew better. The air carried that same quiet weight I had felt before, the kind that presses against the ribs and makes each breath too deliberate. Classes, friends, everything moved as normal on the surface, yet I caught myself pausing in doorways, listening for something no one else could hear. Daniel noticed first. He asked if I was sleeping at all, and I lied, saying the bags under my eyes were from studying. Leah offered to stay over again, though I kept refusing, not wanting anyone else caught in this spiral. Mark joked about it, trying to cut the tension, but his laugh was too short, the kind that dies before it leaves the lips. I couldn't tell them what I saw, because it always sounded weaker when spoken aloud, and yet the silence around it felt like a noose tightening. One night, Leah dragged us all to an old campus theater. She thought maybe a movie, some noise, would clear my head. I wanted to believe her. The place was almost empty, only a handful of students scattered across rows of faded red seats. I tried to focus on the flickering screen, but the dim light threw strange shapes onto the ceiling. Every shift in the shadows pulled my gaze away. Every whisper in the room felt too close, too sharp. Daniel leaned forward, watching me more than the film, while Mark fiddled with the armrest as if it might save him. It wasn't until halfway through that I saw it again. At the back of the theater, in the darkest corner, stood the figure, tall and still, its outline warping the space around it. The reel flickered, and the sound distorted, stretching too long between words. No one else reacted. Leah's eyes were fixed ahead, though her hands trembled against her lap. Daniel tensed, his focus shifting to the same corner I couldn't stop staring at. Mark muttered something low, shaking his head as if denying what was right in front of us. The air grew colder, each breath coming out in a faint mist. The screen light flickered across its face, though there was nothing there to recognize, only a void that seemed to breathe. My chest locked tight, every muscle pulling against itself, unable to move. The rows around us blurred, the sound of the film fell silent, and for a moment, it felt as if only the four of us were trapped inside that darkened room. The hum returned, rolling low across the floor, vibrating through the seats until my teeth ached. And then, as if pulled from nowhere, the man appeared again. The same lantern glow, soft but steady, cutting through the haze. He didn't rush, didn't show fear. His light spread across the room, chasing back the shadows like smoke retreating from wind. The figure recoiled, shrinking, the edges of its form unraveling until it melted back into the dark. The reel sputtered, the sound of the film snapped back, and the students around us blinked, confused, unaware of the silence that had swallowed them. The man stood at the aisle for a heartbeat longer, eyes fixed on me, though his expression never shifted. My chest loosened, air rushing back in, but with it came the weight of knowing he was not a savior, only a barrier between me and something worse. And just as quickly as he had come, he was gone, leaving the ordinary hum of the projector to fill the void. We stumbled out of the theater, none of us speaking for a long time. Leah's hands still shook as she lit a cigarette she didn't even finish. Mark paced in circles, muttering about rational explanations that didn't hold together. Daniel kept his silence, his jaw set hard, though his eyes betrayed the same question that haunted mine. Why me? Why us? Why now? Back in my room, I sat by the window until morning, waiting for the sky to shift from black to gray. I wanted to believe the light would keep it away, but night always returns. And when it does, I know I'll hear that hum again, closer